Thank you for joining us. I'm Gareth, I'm the Creative Director of Veloforte, and I am joined by Marc Giusti, founder of Veloforte, Simon Mottram, founder of Rapha, and Alex Dowsett, pro cycling legend. So thank you for joining me today to talk about two subjects, Manchester to London and how to fuel for long days in the saddle.
I'm trying to remember what came first, the ride for autism or just the ride, because we've always done lots of rides at Rapha, and Rapha was basically an excuse to go out and ride your bike for someone like me. If you're going to work really hard at something, then make sure you lace in lots and lots of really nice rides. But as you know, riding's only interesting if you sort of push it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd always do these, interesting rides. And I think it was 2013, the first ride we did, which was actually Bordeaux-Paris, which sadly for Alex wasn't running during your sort of peak pro time. Otherwise, you'd have been absolute shoo-in to do it, I'm sure. And we just thought, well, let's do a ride for autism, because the two things in my life that make sense are and that matter to me most are cycling and Rapha. And on the other hand, my family and Oscar being the sort of key sort of pillar of my family, around which our whole lives have sort of revolved for 28 years since he was born. And Oscar is he's really quite profoundly disabled. He has autism, but he also has severe learning difficulties. So he's non-verbal, and he's a lovely, lovely guy, but he needs huge amount of support and isn't independent at all. So through his life so far, he's been helped a lot by his mother, but also hugely by Ambitious About Autism. And Ambitious About Autism set up a school called Treehouse. In fact, Treehouse came before Ambitious. And Oscar went there at 3 or 4 years old and stayed till he was 24. They do amazing work for autistic people, young autistic people. And I was so taken by what they'd done, I thought, well, surely there's a way of combining a ride that I could do that pushes myself and raising money for the charity. And as you know, riding is all about pushing yourself and suffering to a degree. Being disabled, having autism, having special severe learning difficulties, that's also suffering. So surely we could do a really long ride and combine it to raise money for charity for Ambitious About Autism. So the first one was Bordeaux-Paris, which was 620 kilometers, which we did in 24 hours. We did it in teams as a relay. Some people, I think 20 people did the whole thing. So I don't know, Alex, I don't know whether you could do that, but it's a bit of a long day in the saddle.
Yeah. Wow.
And we had about 60 or 70 people doing it. It was amazing. And it was nice to take a classic old race, the sort of race that I found incredibly uplifting, aspirational and romantic, and redo it for something meaningful to me. But it was so logistically challenging, we thought, well, hang on, maybe there's something we can do that's a bit easier to organize, that's a bit closer to home. And back in the old days, in the sort of heyday of the sport in the 50s and 60s, most of the races, the key races, went from major city to major city. So you had Paris Tour or Paris Brussels, you had Milano Turino, you had all these amazing races that went from the center of a city to the center of a city. Now that's much more difficult, but there was something about the ambition of doing the two biggest cities in the UK, Manchester to London, in a day that seemed to fit the bill. And so M2L was born 8 years ago.
What was the first year where you did Manchester to London?
2014.
And so, Marc, you rode Manchester to London in 2015.
I did, and it was a hell of a ride. And it funnily enough, became the genesis really of the Veloforte brand all at the same time. And originally, I was doing the ride to, just as Simon was saying, just try and do something that you don't do that often. So, a long ride and train for it. And it's a very kind of mental thing initially, isn't it, to try and sort of have some kind of focus and and have those events in your life. And it became very clear at the time that when I was doing all of the training and looking forward so much to the ride, that the way to fuel was I was learning, firsthand that this was becoming ever more and more important. And frankly, at the time, there was very little choice from an enjoyment point of view, at least, of products that you could reach for. So it started to, I guess, the germ of, hang on a minute, there's got to be a better way. Rapha had been born. It had completely changed the way that we could dress and how we could, I guess, enjoy sort of performance wear. It didn't have to be, as it used to be before, sort of rather garish and nasty stuff. So surely one could do the same thing with nutrition too, was sort of what was forming in my head. And it wasn't really until the ride itself, though, that conversations with Lara, my wife, about, is this a good idea and how could we do it? And she's a heart, lung, respiratory specialist. And so we were looking at all sorts of different recovery potions and products and what could we put together really just for me. And it wasn't really until the ride, though, that I got the chance to, I guess, use it for the entire, the prototypes effectively that we had sort of in anger. And so I sort of discovered halfway along the ride, as I'm handing it to others around me, all of whom were, with GI distress and cramping and all of the obvious stories that we know so well about, the bad side of, trying to feed on a long ride, that I was realizing, hang on, this is much more than just, food for Marc and something that he's trying to do. This is very appealing for a lot of people. And so I think it was somewhere about, by about Tottenham, I think I'd figured out what the name would be and maybe what the proposition would be, and how something like Veloforte, which hadn't been named by that point, could come about. So it became quite it's become, in my memory, at least of my business, a very significant moment of sort of realization too. So it's great to be on this call and talking with Simon about it.
Rapha came in and solved performance, style, and comfort, as Veloforte came in to solve performance, taste, and natural food versus chemicals or synthetic foods.
Sure. And because those are they're very convenient ingredients often, and you can put goo in a tube and you can carry it in your pocket, so it works functionally. But they are unpleasant often to consume them, and you don't need to consume many of those ingredients to get kind of effects you're looking for. You can reach for natural. So it was for us at the time, it was a very real opportunity to somehow awaken everybody up to that kind of idea.
Marc, on that first one, what did you eat?
It was a prototype. So we had, it was the first ones of, in fact, it was the Classico bar, which is a derivative actually of a family recipe, which Lara then adapted and turned more into the performance product that it is. And so it was, but it wasn't in beautiful bar shape. It was very much sort of crumbles and lumps and offcuts and bits in my sort of top tube bag. And I think the hydration, actually, I was just using water at the time. I wasn't at that time trying to play. We hadn't got any electrolytes of our own. And it was, yes, the Classico, and I think what then became the Tabasco, which is essentially the red berries and the pistachios and so on. Those were the very early models, and sharing them around with the guys on the ride was a transformation. You could literally see them sort of go, oh my God, that's delicious, what's that? And that was like the first time I think anybody had on bike nutrition and said the words, oh my God, that's delicious, rather than, oh Christ, what's that? So it was as I said, it's sort of sat in my mind as an epiphany moment, really.
Simon, having done, you've done every edition of Manchester to London, right?
I missed one because I had a bad back. Yeah.
Okay, well that's okay. What's your biggest fueling or nutrition blunder on Manchester to London?
There are many.
Yeah.
And in fact, 220 miles, 350 kilometers, it stretches so many things, and you have so much time to think about all the things that are going wrong. So it's you don't want to make the mistakes. We've got a WhatsApp group of the 160 people who are doing it this year, and there are 4 or 5 key conversations that keep coming back. One's about saddles, one's about tires, tubeless versus clinchers, all that stuff. And one of them is always about nutrition, because people are terrified. And I learned very early on the importance of eating. And in fact, whenever I talk about Manchester to London now, I always say it's as much an eating competition as it is a cycling competition. If you focus too much on speed and watts, in fact, if you ride to watts, you're probably okay. But if you get too carried away with speed, as you do, Gareth, then
I think won it 19 times in a row, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I the first couple I did, I've had a terrible time. I just didn't eat enough for the first 2 hours, 3 hours when you're feeling exuberant. Right. You're not replenishing your stores. And so after about 7 or 8 hours, you just start to fall apart. Yeah. So I've learned quite a lot. I've also learned that I need much more magnesium. So for the couple of weeks before riding, I always take some magnesium because it stops the cramps. And of course, I've now started using Veloforte all the way through. So that's really good. But a combination of things, sweet things, gels and bars, but also real food.
Yeah, totally.
I just think you have to eat way more than you think is humanly possible, and then you've got to check.
It's the old adage of, eat before you're hungry, drink before you're thirsty, and getting into that. And that's really what the training, I think really helps you kind of discover. I think there was a talk you were doing at Rapha that year before, was one of the introductory talks about the ride. And there were all sorts of conversations about, feed stops and, don't worry, you can always get what you want when you're there. And I was thinking, oh yeah, but between the feed stops, there's like 70 miles or something. What are we going to do in between, and how much do you need to carry? And they're looking at the backs of everybody looking like tortoises as they go off with all of this, food in their back jersey pockets. But yeah, the training and learning how to eat ahead of yourself is a really key task, I think.
Yeah, I've ridden it 3 times. The first time I did not fuel right at all. And I think I rode a fairly decent performance, but I did it in mind over matter. And it had a really bad effect on me the next day. So mind over matter worked on the day, 2016 edition. Mind over matter got me through it. Emotions got me through it. The next day, I could not eat a single thing. I had to live off watermelon for about 3 days because I put my body into such a position of discomfort and distress. So when I came back and did it again in 2017, I made sure I fueled properly and did it right. And it's so much easier when you get fueling right and enjoyable. It comes from a complete sufferfest that's miserable, and it becomes something that's genuinely a pleasure to do because you spend an entire day riding your bike. What's better than that? And if you fuel right, you take that mindset versus the kind of Marco Pantani mindset of the faster you do it, the faster the suffering ends,
yes,
which was 2016 for me, and 2017 and last year's edition, 2022, for me were just a fantastic day on the bike that I loved every second of. And
to put it in context, though, Gareth, your long day on the bike is a lot shorter than my long day on the bike.
Oh, well, exactly.
Which is also shorter than some other people. I mean, you do it in 12 hours, I seem to remember, is like the record. Wow, and I do it in sort of 15 hours or 16 hours. And then some people are doing it in 19 or 20 hours. So that's a really long day.
That is.
Yeah. It's relative as well. Everyone, no matter how long it takes, experiences the same waves of emotion, of feeling good and then crashing down and coming back up again. But I'm keen for Alex's kind of insights here, because Manchester to London isn't so different to something ridiculous such as Milan-San Remo. Alex, you've had plenty of long days in the saddle, and what advice do you have for people that might be taking on a challenge such as Manchester to London for the first time, or they're coming back and they want to do better this time?
I wish you'd started with me, because everything's been said. It's no, but I mean, I think the key thing is just for me, it's been the shift in fueling. I mean, how the age-old eating's cheating mentality is so long gone that, like, I notice with the junior team I work with, they're all kind of like, the brag is how many grams of carbs they can tolerate per hour during a race. Like, the bigger the number being the bragging right, and that's very far removed from my early stages of my career and whatnot. So I think it's, if you're a numbers person, then like break it down into the numbers, because if that's a way of like making sure that you get in the right amount. If you're someone that's like no, I want to know, then start adding up what that's going to take, and just planning it ahead, because then that's going to give you a lot of peace of mind about it. I think, and then going back to what you said, Gareth, about enjoying the day and not letting, one, not letting yourself blow, but two, not letting yourself have anxiety over your fueling strategy, because blowing can really ruin your day and ruin the whole experience. So to have that as like an afterthought, I mean, in a different sport, I ran the marathon and I was like, I know what I need to take. So if I finish everything that I'm carrying with me, I'm good.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's how I would approach it. It's like, I'm going to be on the saddle for 12 hours if I'm Gareth, 14 and a half hours if I'm Simon, and 19 something hours if I'm someone else. Okay, what does that look like in terms of the amount that I need to take with me? And then just plan that ahead so you don't then have to think about it so much.
Yeah, I think my 3 editions of Manchester to London have been 3 completely different experiences. The first one, severely underfueled, mind over matter. The second one, I'm going to get this right, but those kind of fueling blunders of I'm going to make my own almond butter energy balls. And what's really going to happen is they're all going to melt in my pocket and turn into one big slab of mush that I have to now try and eat while riding my bike as fast as I can. To the 3rd edition of using Veloforte bars and knowing exactly how many carbs are in each bar or gel or chew, and having them arranged in my pockets. It's convenient, it tastes amazing, and the experience of each of those rides was better and better and better. So it is trial and error, but what I want us to hopefully achieve by recording this podcast is that we can help people make fewer mistakes at the start and get straight to the right answers.
Yeah, and I think it's what Simon was saying too. It's that very important blend of your liquids and your solids and your real foods and your water, as well as perhaps some electrolytes. It isn't just because, as Alex was saying, if you added it all up, you could get to quite a long list and go, wow, that sounds like a lot, and I've got to carry that, or I don't know how to eat that much, or all these sorts of questions. And if you do break it down, as Alex was saying, you suddenly realize, well, actually, that's 2 gels here, that's some water there, that's a little pause. When I get to this point, I'll take 5 minutes, and however you want to ride the race, but it's not even race, I beg your pardon, the ride. But you do need to think of it, as Alex was saying, in that way of not only how much do I need to get through, but how might I get through that, and enjoy that and actually make that a pleasurable experience. Because if you're just bashing the gels the whole time, guess what? You're going to struggle. You need some solids, you need some water, you need some sachets, and think about how your ride, particularly as someone was saying at the beginning, when you've sort of forgotten to fuel because you're quite excited. And also the weather plays a huge part. If it's teeming with rain, that's even more difficult to think about food. So it's just trying to think about setting the alarm on your Garmin or your Wahoo, and that just beeps at 20 minutes, and that's the reminder to take a drink, or that's a reminder to take a bite of a bar or something like that, and helping yourself pace yourself, I think.
Yeah, there's a difference, I think, between a sort of 4 to 6 hour ride, which is most people's, that's my sort of nice big ride of the week. And there you can get away with a couple of bars, probably, and some electrolytes in the hot weather, you'd be okay. And there's a difference between that and doing 12 hours plus, where I just think the body goes through a different phase. And I think if you're a professional like Alex, you probably can just keep shoving in those gels as much as you can, because you're getting paid to do it, and you've got a different mindset. But if you're someone like me who quite likes a glass of wine, and I start to go slightly crazy. So on Manchester to London, we now have fish and chips, which is probably sacrilege for a professional. But when you're about 8 hours in, you just want to sit down and have something that's salty and really sort of savory, and then you can go back onto the bars afterwards, or the gels afterwards, for a bit. So I just think when it gets over about 12, 13 hours, it's a really big deal, and you have to have a big variety.
Yeah, I think variety is key with flavors as well. When you're eating sweet things all day, having different textures, different flavors really helps. One thing I remember from last year's Manchester to London was, after 12 hours of eating, your body doesn't really want to eat anything else. You've crammed in a lot of food, and yet you still need to keep putting fuel into your body, energy into your body. And I pulled out one of our Doppio gels. This is coffee flavored, And because of the coffee flavor, the bitterness, it completely refreshed my palate and enabled me to start eating again. So it's like say things like fish and chips or the taste of coffee can just reset your system and allow you to keep going forward. And I love how fuel has the ability to do that. To completely,
well, it motivates too, doesn't it? You know, a taste of something delicious that you also know is working is a real motivator. And a lot of the time, because nutrition has a very bad reputation for frankly tasting like shit, people prefer not to eat it, right? So they go, oh, I'll go another hour. The last thing I could think of is gagging down the watermelon and God knows whatever it is, flavored synthetic crap. And that's hard to always keep putting in you, right? Whereas if you've got, you know, your feed stops coming and you've got your fish and chips in your mind and you think, okay, how much do I need to eat to get to there? It becomes a much more motivating experience.
I think the morale of great tasting food or food that you enjoy eating is worth more than the actual energy, the carbohydrate number. I think the morale is far more lifting. But
I do remember a few years ago, I do remember taking some little chews. I know Veloforte has little chews, which have got a little dose of energy. It's like a gel, but in chew form. And it was about 3 hours to go, and I was really flagging, and I had a whole packet of these little chews.
Delicious.
I just went like a rocket. About 5 minutes later, I went past about 30 or 40 people. I was sort of like gurning as I went past. Found this third wind.
What's
There's
a hill? There's when you get in,
magic.
when you just get, I can't remember the name of the hill. It's just as you come out of Manchester, I think. And it's
Bakewell.
Oh my God.
Bakewell.
You have a pack of chews before you get there, I guess. So 20 minutes or so before, have one of those.
Yeah.
I find the little piece of cardboard in there is a lovely slope. If you just tip it right, and they all just
tilt. We should write on the pack, shouldn't we? Tilt here or something.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question to those of you in the know? So I did L'Etape du Tour, which is, you know, the closest some of us ever got to riding a race because it was closed roads and it was in the mountains. I did 10 of those, and every year you'd get all the Brits would turn up. Sometimes it would include myself, with pockets absolutely groaning with gels and bars and a million things. And then you get the wily French clubmen turning up, and they would we'd have jackets and full finger gloves because it was the mountains, you know, you could die up there, son. And they'd turn up with like a skimpy gilet at 5 a.m. and about 3 of those little tubes with like a little break top that looked so suspicious, and nothing else. And I can only assume they're going to use the feed stops. But how could they get away with carrying so little and having these little tiny gels on a sort of 6 to 8 hour mega day in the mountains?
Probably from my point of view, it just that's all they've known. That's all, and just sheer condition, like stubborn, forcing their bodies to be okay with that. And I would imagine for that sort of effort, even though it's uphill, they have one pace. And if they go an incremental amount over it, suddenly they'll go into burning sugar rather than fats. And then the drop off would be very quick. And they know, they just know where that limit is. They don't know they know, but they know. And they just sit at that pace. And they can do that all day. And you have them. We have them round, just round Essex. Like some of the old guys, just one bottle on their bike for a 5 or 6 hour day, and I think it's just years and years and years of conditioning. And it's that thing in cycling where it's like, why? Well, if we've always done it that way and it's worked, why would we change it?
Right.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah, I think I've been that rider. I've been the rider that can ride on fat reserves only and not need to eat or drink anything, but you can only ride at one speed, and that's in your zone 2. As soon as you step out of zone 2 and you get into your threshold or VO2 max area, it's game over. Now I'm a carbohydrate rider, I'm a happier rider, and a much faster rider. What learnings do you have from your career that could apply to a 12-hour plus, up to 20-hour ride that finds the right balance of comfort and speed? So tires, saddles, aero kit or not aero kit?
Yeah, I mean, quite often in these kind of things, when someone like me provides an opinion, often I'm sorry, your group chat's going to come away with more questions than answers, because saddles is only part of the puzzle. And Simon, I'm sure you'll know, but we often, when someone says I've got a rubbish chamois, it's often not a rubbish chamois, it's actually where the chamois is placed in the shorts, or it's how they've put their shorts on, or it seems. So it's not just saddle, it's shorts. And then there's not just saddle, there's saddle angle, saddle argument, and then how to put your shorts on properly, which is something whilst I was in Movistar, a teammate showed me, and it was a case of turning the Simon, you might have a different, if please butt in if you've got a different, because it's the only way I've been told, is turn the gripper upside down, do a very, very deep squat, right, and then allow the shorts to kind of rise up in that deep squat, and that is where your shorts sit, and then put the gripper back down again.
What about aero, Alex? Because I've had lots of people over the years, we've started using bar bags because you're on the road for a long time, rather than putting stuff in your pocket, stick it in a bar bag. But then if you're going to be sitting in the wind, I mean, I would always advise people doing a long ride like we're doing Manchester to London to hide behind other people and don't get here. But let's assume for a long time you are going to be in the wind. That must make a big difference, having a bar bag or having the wrong kind of kit, in a way that a 2-hour ride with your mates, it doesn't make much difference.
I'd agree with that. You'd probably want to have more access to a frame bag that sits in the triangle than a bar bag. There was a bar, it wasn't a bar bag, it was one that sat behind my stem, strapped to the top of the top tube with a magnetic access point. Again, when we're talking about fueling, having fueling that you look forward to makes it easier to fuel. Having fuel you can access easy makes it easier to fuel as well. And this had a simple little magnetic flap, and everything, all my nutrition is just stacked there, ready to go. So I'd probably, from an aero point of view, go for those over a big old handlebar bag, because there's also handling, like that big old weight on. I know they're fashionable, I know they look pretty, but that big old weight hanging on the front does have an impact on handling. What's the policy on tri-bars on the ride?
I think you might be accused of taking it a bit too seriously. But, no, you could, and anyone can use tri-bars. There is, we make up the rules, and there is no rule about tri-bars. So,
I mean, the tri-bars, I think they get a bad rep in being an aero thing, but they're a comfort thing for me. It's set up right where you've got the pad underneath your elbow. You can relax your whole upper body. It's like, imagine doing, for me, it's like doing holding yourself in a press up position versus holding yourself on a plank on your elbows. Like, you've suddenly just taken, when you're holding onto the handlebars normally, that's all, like, your triceps are working hard and your shoulders and everything. Put them on the tri-bars, suddenly biceps, triceps, arms, everything becomes redundant because it's bone that's taking that weight of your upper body. Downside to that is that would only be reserved for when you are riding by yourself, because there's not quick access to brakes. So that the whole safety aspect to that. And there's an aero gain there as well. So there's lots of little things, but saddles very small part of the puzzle.
Yeah, I know some endurance athletes like Lyle Wilcox, who do multi-day, incredible long journeys. They'll often have tri-bars because it gives you a different position to put your body into. After about 6 hours, you just want to change.
Yeah. I found the brevet shorts, the cargo shorts as well, revelation. I mean, it sounds such an obvious thing to have pockets on your legs, whereas that wasn't a thing not so long ago. And that actually is a fantastically simple answer to how you can carry more in an accessible way. And that in a top tube bag, it's great.
Yeah. We developed those. There's a guy who worked for me in design who was racing the Transcontinental.
Right.
He was racing to Istanbul from the Belgian coast, and he said, listen, I want a place I can put my food really easy, accessible, like Alex was saying, on the top tube.
Yeah.
And so we stitched some pockets on the side of the shorts for him, and he came back and said that was the thing that made it. So that's why we produced them. But yeah, they're good for rappers, if nothing else.
Perfect, they are, and that is a thing. That is a thing. I mean, we do need to be. There's a huge issue around people littering, and of course the nature of those wrappers tends to be that they are not so recyclable, because of course they have to have an oxygen water barrier to them. So it's a very big issue. So yes, all of you kids listening, no littering, please.
Those pros setting a bad example, isn't it?
But what about rice cakes? Because there was a phase, wasn't there, possibly driven by Team Sky and Ed Valcke.
Yeah, I have a slight opinion of rice cakes.
Looks like Alex does as well.
Yeah,
it's an insult to the word cake.
Yeah, it's an insult to cake.
Unless you have Alex's experience of reaching behind your back, taking out a soiny wrap, foil, papery parchment thing, you're still riding at full chat. You've got to open it somehow with 3 teeth and a finger, and then you've got to sort of squish it half up your nose. It's a nightmare. Right, okay. Maybe stop at the bus stop and get out a little napkin and have some lunch or something. That's probably a nicer way to do it.
I think there's also, I mean, some people really like them, not to completely rail on them, but there's actually less. When we were doing the maths in I can't remember which team, I was like, how many grams of carbs are in these? And they're like, well, about 20. I was like, I was expecting right. Like, that's what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
The amount of hassle it is to eat these.
Yeah.
So it's a big product with very low carbohydrates overall. So stressing your digestive system for very little return.
Yeah. I think it's worth talking about sort of going like reasonably low fiber in the days leading up to the event. Not necessarily no fiber, because that's quite an unhealthy existence, but like lower fiber, just so you've got, it kind of reduces the chances of in-ride gut, like stomach issues needing to go pretty quick and not having access to facilities.
So what would you eat for those people who don't instantly know what's low fiber? What would you?
I'd be going for white rice over like whole wheat pasta or rice, or white bread over brown bread. I think pancakes for breakfast is a very underrated breakfast in the site. A lot of people lean towards the whole porridge. The porridge I've always found is actually quite poor bang for buck in terms of carbs, for the amount that you have to eat, because that, overnight oats, if you have to have oats, which is quite high fiber, overnight oats, you're probably getting better bang for buck because they don't expand so much.
Sure.
But yeah, pancakes, waffles, that kind of thing is very low residue food, highly digestible. I've found like with that and like the Veloforte product, I can reduce there's that age-old 3-hour rule, like you need to stop eating 3 hours before the start of your ride. I've found I can reduce that with I can be snacking on pancakes in that final 3 hours, or the Veloforte chews and gels, and have no stomach issues mid. And this is time trial, so this is like high intensity stuff. But that's changed things.
I found nerves as well. So you might wake up the morning of an event. It might be Manchester to London. It might be a time trial. It might be a bunch race. But if you wake up with nerves, it's hard to put food in your system. Whereas something like the chews are so good because you can still eat these. They sit really easy and they're sweet. It doesn't feel like you're eating something heavy. It doesn't affect your nerves. So
it's actually a very important point too, because a lot of people fall into the trap of perhaps not eating for the first few hours, and then, as Simon was saying, you're now in deficit, right? Now you've now got this. It's hard to come back, and so suddenly they'll take 2 or 3 gels in very quick succession, and all of a sudden you're now overloading the whole sort of carb story, and you're swinging around, and so you can't feel it at first, but you suddenly, it's an unhelpful way to eat. But if you were to do some porridge, you put your doppio gel as the syrup on your porridge, that's delicious, right? You can have another gel into your bidon, like it's a cordial, so that can extend or lower the amount of carbs that you're taking, but extend the use of the products, in a much smarter way. So you don't go through kind of feast famine kind of approach to your feeding, and just keeping it nice and steady.
And,
So-
and people like me who are not scientific about this stuff at all, I'm much more of a Pantani emotional person than a scientist. Just remind me how many grams of carbs on average, because it will depend by weight, I'm sure, but how many grams of carb do you have to be taking on an endurance ride per hour?
Yeah, Alex, do you want to take that one? I've got my thoughts, but Alex has got a lot more insight, having worked with being an athlete himself and working with the new junior team as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think given its low intensity, if you shoot for your body weight in grams of carbs, that as a minimum would be good. And there's no, the maximum is what you can handle. I mean, but then again, I wouldn't say there's any point in shooting for any more than sort of 30 or 40 grams more than your body weight.
Yeah.
So, me at 80 kilos, I wouldn't be bothering in any kind of not at TT pace by trying to take more than 120 grams of carbs per hour. Yeah.
So last year when I did Manchester to London, I was 70 kilos. I aimed for 80 grams of carbohydrates an hour. And for the first 8 hours, everything went perfectly to plan. I could eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. But then after 8 hours, I started to feel the effects of a long day of eating lots of food. And it was at that point where I really relied on fluids, so electrolytes and gels, because they enabled me to keep putting carbs in without, that kind of heavy feeling of I've eaten a lot of food today.
And I guess if you're somebody who is more of a sort of leisurely cyclist, you're in the sort of 15, 16, 18, 19 hour window for this ride. You just try and put that 90, 120 grams carbs. That'll be a lot for a rider like that. They should probably be much more down in the, let's say, the 60s, maxing out around there, because they'll be at a slow is the wrong word, but they'll be doing it at a comfortable pace. And so what they're really trying to do is sort of stay kind of neutral on their energy levels, as it were, rather than power for power. And that's try to not, if you're not used to eating that much carb, you need to train for that. If you haven't trained for that, I'd keep the numbers down a little bit.
Yeah, so to visualize that as well. So this is essentially what I ate every hour. A bar, that's 40 grams of carbs, give or take. Electrolytes, that's 22 grams of carbs, and a gel, 22 grams of carbs. So it's just over 80 grams of carbs, and that doesn't look like very much,
And in an hour, that's a great mix, and with a bottle of water to support that.
Yeah, absolutely. Hydration.
That's a really good selection.
So Alex, what would you eat? Okay, Simon's giving you a call. He says, Alex, FYI, you're riding Manchester to London tomorrow. What are you going to eat for dinner? And what are you going to have for breakfast?
This late in the day, everything I can find.
That's right.
Okay, a week's notice. Let's go with a week's notice.
Fridge is going to be empty by the time I leave. So I'd be shooting for high carb. I always function when I've really got nutrition dialed. So my thing was always the 3 meals before, the 3 meals prior to a ride. I think for a ride that long, I'd extend it to probably 5 meals prior. So it's quite an unusually long ride. So that would be high carb breakfast, but low GI. So you sort of pancakes, waffles kind of thing, real stack, plenty of honey on it, or agave syrup, or jam.
In the various teams that you've been in, Alex, culturally, lots of different dinner offers. If you were racing in an Italian team, you might just get bowls and bowls of pasta, spaghetti. What's worked for you in your career in terms of the big meal before the day?
I think by the end of my career, every team was dialed, so it was a lot of the same stuff, and that sort of then transcended culture. I think where the biggest cultural difference was timings. Like Movistar dinner was at 9, whereas the British teams and the German teams, your team dinner's more sort of 7-ish. And and then how your plates would come out, which actually, and the European way of serving, especially Spanish way of serving your carbs and then your protein, works quite well for the amount if you're wanting to eat a lot, because then you've got a whole dinner plate full of carbohydrates, whereas normally, like in the UK where we put everything on one plate, you'll have like a quarter of it will be your vegetables, and then a quarter of it will be like your proteins, and then the half of it might be your carbs, and that would be considered a high carb meal. But then actually compared to the Italians, it's probably not as much as what they're having. So I would be adopting a more exotic plating mechanism. And that'd be 5. Like I just would not, in this day and age, everyone is weight focused. Everyone's trying to lose weight, and for those 5 meals, I would be not trying to lose weight. And I think that is to remove that from my mind and go, like, the weight now is the weight I am. And actually at the start of this ride, I'm probably going to be 2 or 3 kilos heavier because of what I'm about to inhale.
Yeah.
And that's the plan. That's what I should be. And and if your journey has been weight loss and you've gone from 80 kilos to 75, what that means is when you start on the morning of the ride, you're going to start the morning of that ride at 78 kilos, which you might look at it and go, well, this is heartbreaking because I got down to 75. But actually, had you stayed at 80, you'd be starting that ride at 83 kilos. So the difference is that gain is still the same. It's just, it's the same reduction plus your glycogen stores, which are a good thing. I think that would be, if you are someone that weighs yourself each morning, that's to be expected, not to be, you can really start your day bad if you're looking down and go, oh, I'm 3 kilos heavier, I don't know how today's going to go. It should be like, oh, I'm 3 kilos heavier because I should be, because that is the right start for today.
It is, and the ride it is a beautiful route. It's an absolutely brilliant ride, and it's, to my mind anyway, it's not about how well you can smash it. It's about actually how well you can enjoy and actually take time to look up. You'll be doing a lot of this, right? So stick your head up and look around, and you'll see it's a great route. And if you're feeling full and you're comfortable, and you're going to have a really great day. And as you say, if you're carrying a load of anxiety about things that now that at the start line just don't matter, it's just not the right way to start at all in your head.
Yeah, you kind of adopt different mindsets throughout the day, or even throughout the additions that you do. And I think last year was the most healthiest. I kind of sat back and thought, I don't have to do anything today other than ride my bike. This is truly a gift. I can spend 12 hours riding the most beautiful countryside. It's described as the spine of England, and you see every part of England in one day. It's a beautiful tour. Quickly, Simon, what's you obviously, the creator of M2L. What are your pre-ride rituals?
Well, I do eat a lot. I mean, again, not being scientific, I do know that I have to eat a lot sort of for 2 or 3 days before. I might adopt the 5 days before, or 5 meals before, I think it was, Alex, wasn't it? Damn, maybe it's 3 days. But I would always I'll drink a lot of water for the 2 days before. I'll consume way more than I'd normally drink, and I struggle to drink enough water every day anyway. So I'll make sure I drink a couple of liters a day, and I will eat a lot of pasta. I'll eat pizza. I'll eat anything that's kind of carb rich and that I enjoy. On the morning, well, I have what I'm used to, and I'm sure that's the right advice, is not to, certainly now I've got 10 days to go before the event.
Don't change that
I'm
up.
not switching the morning, but I do have porridge because my body always has porridge in the morning. And so I'll have a couple of instant porridges. So I've got like this block of stuff in my stomach. I will definitely have coffee, although I've realized that having too many coffees too early in the ride can set my stomach off pretty bad. So I'll have a strong coffee before the beginning, and then I probably won't have another one, even though we have a coffee stop after 50, 60 kilometers in, I'll
Yeah.
probably not have a coffee then, because it sends my guts into crisis.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll just be eating healthily but big meals, and I'll cut down the wine. I won't go cold turkey, because I haven't done in 30 years, so I'm not going to completely write out, but I'll probably have a glass of wine the night before.
Yeah.
And as you say, enjoy it. As you said, Gareth, it's 12 to 18 hours
Yeah.
or whatever of riding your bike with friends for something meaningful. If the weather's good, it's the most beautiful ride.
Yeah.
When there's a headwind and the weather's not good, like when Bradley did it,
Yeah.
not a good day.
2017 was a headwind for 95% of the journey. It was absolutely challenging. I was going to use a naughty word, challenging. Yeah. I would also challenge you, Simon, to not just drink water on the build up, the lead up to Manchester to London, but to drink some electrolytes too.
Yeah, it's good. That's a good point.
It gets the potassium and the sodium in too. So not just water, but I'll challenge you to chuck some electrolytes in as well.
I wouldn't mix them with the wine then.
Yeah.
Good idea.
I'll write that one down.
Yeah. Product development. Okay. Yeah. And Simon, do you want to just finalize with some M2L stats? You know, do you have on the top of your head some impressive stats about the impact of Manchester to London? And the funds raised and the education and the awareness that has improved as a result of these rides.
Yeah, I mean, it's something which the charity is hugely supportive of, and we couldn't do it without the charity's help, actually, because we have Rapha people helping out, but actually it's run by the volunteers from the charity. So we have 15 to 20 people who help run the thing, and I think it's in the top 3 of their sort of annual fundraising events that aren't corporate sponsorship. So it's up there with the marathon and some other things that they do. So it's really significant for them, which is incredibly pleasing. And over this will be the 8th time we've done it over 10 years. So in those 8 events, we've raised £1.5 million, which is pretty satisfying. Everybody who does the ride is encouraged to raise £1,000 each. Some people raise much more, some people raise slightly less, but it's tantamount to it's testament to how hard it is that it's something which people feel they can go to all their contacts and say, listen, I need your help to do this. This is going to be bloody hard. Can you help me? And people do throw out the cash. So it's raised a lot of money. We've had something like 600 riders doing it over the years. We have many people who come back every time. There are 2 riders who've done every single one, including Paris, the first thing we did. I've done 7 out of the 8, so I'm sort of sadly lagging. It's an incredible thing. And this year we've got 160 riders. Last year we had 55 because it was post. So 160 riders is a pretty meaty thing.
I was amazed by the sign-ups this year compared to last year. Haven't ridden it last year, but for me the difference is is the impact of the education too. So I've got 4 nephews with autism, and at the start of their lives, to be honest, I was completely clueless to what autism was, and by doing things like the Manchester to London rides kind of challenged me to learn more and to understand more, and I think there's much more awareness about autism now in society. And I do think that Manchester to London has absolutely contributed to my awareness and education, but to many others as well.
And we have people who are autistic doing the ride. The first time that happened sort of 3 or 4 years ago, a guy rode up alongside me and introduced himself and said that he'd just recently been diagnosed because he was diagnosing his son. And he'd been going through these questions thinking, hang on, that sounds like me. And it's pretty humbling when you're doing this very difficult thing and you're quite emotional anyway. And then there's a guy next to you who's doing it and he's autistic. And this year, I think we've got 6 people who are autistic doing the ride. It's a wonderful thing.
It's not just a ride. It's not just about you. It's about society and the next generation.
I remember before I did it in 2015, I had the pleasure of visiting the Treehouse venue, and they give us a sort of a little tour and a walk around, and extraordinary. I mean, it really is. I mean, you know it far better than I, Simon, but the setup there is something else, and it does stay with you, so you realise just how much support there is, and it's very much a part of certainly was part of my ride experience as well.
Sorry, guys, we have a saying at home which is "keep on keeping on." And it's very apt for any endurance ride or endurance sport, but it's also coined for us because, well, it's a song by the Redskins when I was growing up, which is by the by, but it's something you have to bear in mind if you're doing something like Manchester to London. There'll be times when you think you can't do it, and physically you can, but your mind switches off and your mind's telling you can't. So keep on keeping on is something which I tell everybody through the ride. It's written on all my bikes. I've now got it on all my custom bikes. So
thanks for your time, Simon, and yeah, good luck with this year's
such
ride.
good fun talking to you, Alex. Really nice to see you. I haven't seen you since probably Adelaide Airport or
I
Melbourne.
was going to say it was probably Adelaide Airport.
Pre-COVID, I think it was. Yeah,
just before the madness.
But nice to see you. Thanks very much.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you, Simon.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Right.